This video will teach you how to write LEQ number 2. It's going to be very similar to LEQ number 1 with a few minor changes. Like LEQ 1, this is a causation LEQ. So you're looking for causes or effects. Why does stuff happen and what happens as a result? Okay, here's your prompt for LEQ number 2. This is a causation prompt. Elevate the historical effects of the ratification of the U.S. Constitution in the period from 1789 to 1808. So one of the first things you should do when you look at this prompt is figure out what type of LEQ. I'm telling you it's causation, and you can get that from the effects. Now it means you're looking for effects of the Constitution. And look at the time period is the other thing I would look at. The time period is 1789 to 1808. So you must keep your essay within the confines of 1789 to 1808. So you're looking for specific effects of the Constitution in that short time period. So one of the first things I would do as I'm beginning to write this LEQ is I need to figure out what caused the creation of the Constitution. This is how I get my pre-context. So the big question you should be thinking before we even write the paper is, what are the causes of the creation of the Constitution? It should be in your introduction. Remember that your pre-contextualization is going to be 3 to 4 sentences that kind of set the stage. This is kind of like previously on, or give me the information, how we get to the point in the prompt. So your pre-contextualization must occur prior to 1789. You're giving me kind of a recap. Remember I talked about Netflix and having season recap. You need to give me a recap of how we got to the point of the ratification of the U.S. Constitution. All right, I'm going to give you a step-by-step on how to do the pre-context for this particular LEQ. Number 1, you have to figure out what the prompt is asking. The prompt, remember, is asking for the effects of the U.S. Constitution from 1789 to 1808. So your next step is, what is causing the situation in the prompt? So the question you need to ask yourself is, why did the Founding Fathers write the Constitution? You've got lots of different options. I'm going to go over piece by piece here in a minute. So once you've figured out the answer to that question, you need to write your ACE. Okay, so answer that question. Why did they? All right, so here are some options that you could have for your pre-contextualization. Remember your prompt, I put it at the top right corner of this slide. And your pre-context is going to answer this question. What caused the Founding Fathers to write the Constitution? One option you can use is Shays' Rebellion. You need to fully explain how Shays' Rebellion caused them to try and revise the Articles and eventually write the U.S. Constitution. It's very important that you fully explain that. Remember, we talked about in your LEQ, or sorry, not your LEQ, your short answer questions, that this was one of the answers. All right, remember the next step here in writing your LEQ is organizing the causes and effects, okay? And the way we organize these causes and effects is through the themes of APUSH, an acronym that we call SPACEMEN. So you need to look at the different effects of the Constitution and place them in one of these categories. Okay, and I'm going to give you the categories that I have come up with. Mr. C and I kind of fleshed this out. Category number 1 is politics. So you're going to look at the political effects of the Constitution. Number 2 are the economic effects. And the third one is going to be foreign policy. So those are your 3 categories that are going to go in your pre-writing chart when you fill it out. And I'm going to go over those next. All right, so the chart in your handout, you're going to fill those out. I'm going to give you some help on that right now. You remember you get your 3 titles: political, economic, and foreign policy. And here are some examples. You don't have to use all of these examples, but there's lots of examples to pull from here. Let's start with political. You've got the cabinet system, the response to the Whiskey Rebellion, Marbury versus Madison, the election of 1800, 12th Amendment, two-term tradition, Judiciary Act, Alien Sedition Act, Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, and the Louisiana Purchase Treaty. All of those things happened in 1789 to 1808. Political results of the U.S. Constitution. So you can choose any of those. Economically speaking, you have Hamilton's financial plan. You have his whiskey tax. You have the creation of the bank, printing of money, paying the debts, the Barbary Pirates Tribute, the Embargo Act, or the Louisiana Purchase from the aspect of opening up land for trade. That's your economic effects of the Constitution. Foreign policy-wise, you've got lots of foreign policy examples you can choose from. Proclamation of Neutrality, Citizen Genet, Washington's Farewell Address, XYZ Affair, the creation of the Navy, Barbary Pirates, Embargo Act, Impressment, Jay Treaty, Pinckney Treaty. All of these are examples of foreign policy decisions made as a result of the creation of the Constitution. None of these things were possible really under the Articles, so you need to pick what you want to talk about. Okay, so as we look at this list, we got to figure out, okay, which one of these effects is the strongest? Okay, what I'm going to choose is the strongest one for me is going to be politics or political. So that's going to be my A. So for A, you're going to use two of those examples for A because it's your strongest. B is going to be economic. Okay, so pick one of those as your economic example. And then this time, instead of X, we're going to use C because your concession or your complexity is not really going to apply in this particular part because you're going to need to rank your three types of effects. Okay, so you're going to do political, A is the strongest, economic, B is second strongest, foreign policy the weakest, or whichever order you want to do it in. So those are your A, B, and C. Okay, so I would choose two examples for A, one example for B, one example for C. That's really all you need here. All right, let's put this all together. So your thesis is going to look a little different this time because you're going to use C instead of X, but it's going to be the same basic format. You have all those C plus A and B, therefore Y. Okay. So here I'm giving you a sample one, and I didn't really fully fill it out, so I'm just going to give you kind of a shell of what it would be. So you're going to say, although the ability to manage an effective foreign policy was in effect, the U.S. Constitution led to, and then give me your political and your economic effect there. And remember, do not use a vocab term. Use a very broad description of what you're going to talk about. And then your therefore statement is going to be very, very strong. The U.S. Constitution created a strong central government that could allow the development of a strong economy. So you've got your political and you've got your economic in there, but you're being very broad there, and that is your thesis. Remember, we've been kind of hammering this home every week. You're going to be using the ACE strategy to write your body paragraphs. Hopefully, you'll be very good at this by the end of the year. You're going to answer the prompt with your arguments. You're then going to cite a vocabulary term to support your answer and fully explain how it proves your answer to the prompt. Always go back to the prompt. Always go back to your thesis. It's going to show kind of a cohesive argument that you're making to support the answer of your prompt. All right, here's your step-by-step how to do the post-context. Remember, step one is what resulted from the situation in the prompt. So you're going to look for long-term post-1808. Anything that happens after 1808 is fair game for the post-contextualization. This is, once again, going to be another ACE. This is going to take place in your conclusion after you've restated your thesis. Here are some options that you can use for post-contextualization. Okay, just like your pre-context, I'm giving you some options on what to choose for your post-contextualization. This shouldn't be too difficult to figure out, but here are some lasting effects resulting from the ratification of the U.S. Constitution. Option number one is war powers, the War of 1812. Remember that the U.S. Constitution has very specific rules on declaring war. We didn't really have any wars under the Articles of Confederation, so this could be a definite result of the Constitution. Option number two is the expansion of democracy. This, of course, happens in the age of Jackson. We talked about that in Chapter 9. So you could use examples from the expansion of democracy during the age of Jackson. Option number three is from Chapter 8. You could use the era of good feelings, political unity, growth of the federal government. That could be another option, and how the powers of the federal government expand during that era. And the other option is internal improvements, the American system, which I believe you're going to get in chapter 9 or chapter 10. I can't remember which one. But internal improvements, the canal system, the roads, you could use that as another effect, and that's more economic in nature for the Constitution. So what I would do here is pick whichever one you know most about and use that as your post-context. Okay, so a few things I want to go over here with the outline of your LEQ. It's a little different than last time. Since this is a causation essay that asks for effects, your complexity would be giving a cause. And so in this particular essay, your pre-contextualization would count as your complexity point, giving you really only one opportunity for contextualization, and that's at the end at the post-contextualization. Okay? So it's very important you do well in your post-context because that's your only opportunity for contextualization, as your pre-context is going to count as complexity. I know you guys have been a lot better at the pre-context than the post, so try to do a good job on your post-contextualization for this LEQ. Remember, you are ranking your effects of the Constitution, so your A, B, and C. If you rank them in your essay, if you literally say the strongest effect of the Constitution is, and then explain why it's the strongest and why B is the second strongest and why C is the weakest. If you add that little extra bit to your essay, that also counts as complexity. So then you could technically, under that circumstance, you could count your pre-context as contextualization. So it just depends on how you do it. If I feel like you've done a good job of ranking and your pre-context is good, but your post-context is terrible, I would still count your pre-context as your contextualization. So make sure you try to make it a nice complex essay that has all those elements, okay? So really, once again, very simple 5-paragraph essay. Make sure that your thesis statement is restated at the beginning of the last paragraph. Okay, here's the rubric. It's exactly the same as the last one. I'll give you 1 point for your thesis. You must have it in both the introduction and the conclusion. Remember, sometimes you might write a better thesis in your conclusion. Contextualization, remember, this really only counts for your post-context on this particular essay because your pre-context is going to count as complexity unless you rank your effects. So remember, we give you a couple options or a couple ways to get contextualization in your essay. All right, evidence points. You get 1 point for the A and the C. So if you give me specific examples of historical evidence, so if you give me some vocab terms that are effects of the Constitution, then this will give you at least 1 point towards evidence. You get the second point if you're able to fully explain how they are effects of the Constitution, and answering the prompt and tying it back to the thesis gets you that second point. Okay, analysis and reasoning. 1 point should be easy to get because you're creating an argument. You're telling me what the strongest cause or what the strongest effects of the Constitution are. So that should be easy to do because you're using a causation formula here. The second point, a little more challenging. You've got a couple ways to do it. You can give me a really good cause of the Constitution in the pre-context, or you can do an effective job at ranking in the body paragraphs the relative strength of the effects of the Constitution's ratification. So those are 2 options for getting your complexity there. Okay, some general rules on your essays. You got a 12-point font, Times New Roman only. Make sure it's 1.5 space, no double spacing. At least 2 to 3 pages, 5 paragraphs, and it would be really helpful if you labeled your contextualization and your thesis in your final draft. So just follow these simple rules and you should score well on your LEQ. Good luck. If you have any questions, let me know.